So I think it's because I trained as a storyteller. My first bit of understanding how to use stories was for narrative therapy. It was for
Oh,
bereavement counseling,
okay.
and just understanding how you work through the stories, how you understand things through stories. And I've literally spent my life, Siddharth, understanding how story works in every field. Because at the end of the day, I believe truly that we're not made up of a bunch of molecules and atoms. We are made up of stories. That's what makes up a human being.
Yeah.
And it is literally by the addition or subtraction or understanding of these stories that we move forward or regress or stay where we are.
Yeah.
And so it is all about stories in my mind, because that's what makes sense in the world around us to us. Stories give currency. I mean, they give, that's the currency of a story. It gives meaning to our facts.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, yeah. So I've always, I think Seema Anand is a very common name as well. We found that there are a lot of Seema Anands out there. I think it must have been the most popular name at one point around the time I was born. So so I think that just made it different. It was Seema Anand storytelling, because I am primarily a storyteller. There's a very old story, I think it's from Sri Lanka, and it was rewritten, and it's about the fact that that's what makes you immortal. It's your story that will live on, or the
Right.
stories that you tell. And I love the idea that the stories become the unicorns, or they're your footsteps in the sand, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But that is what is remembered afterwards.
Right.
Is the story.
Amazing.
And I just think it's incredible. I think the people who brought it into the mainstream, into the corporate world, really, was World Bank. Actually, they're the ones who brought it into the corporate sector to begin with. And what they'd said was they found that they do so much work around the world, around the globe. They have so much information, they have so much experience, they have so much data. But they found that people couldn't find access to that data. They actually couldn't. Their staff could not access the data. And they discovered that the only way of making sure that that data could be accessed was if they took it all and transferred it into stories. So it was a massive project, but they literally converted things into stories. And I think that it's just incredible. When we first started, so I've lived in the UK. I live in the UK, as you know. I've lived here since I got married, which was in December '85. So I've been here a long time. Storytelling is something that we believed in ancient India in a very big way.
Yep.
We then lost it. Ancient India had all of this, and then it lost it. And for a long time, storytelling did not exist. Even today, it's only now starting to come back as an art form. Right. But we completely lost it. So the people who brought it back really were the Americans. So when I started working in the corporate sector, the Americans were really happy with this word storytelling. The Brits, the Indians, it was nonsense to them.
Not so much.
And then, not so much at all. Then gradually over here in this country, in the UK, I started to talk about storytelling. They start to accept it. Some people were open to it, some still weren't. It was a bit of a struggle. India still was very close to the idea. Now they have opened up, and they've opened up in a big way. So I've done a lot of keynote talks around corporates in India on the power of storytelling, because just explaining to people that every effective leader through history has used stories to communicate their message. So there's a story that is told about, and I think it comes from the Jewish folklore. But basically, it's about this guy who decides one day that he wants to be the best archer in the world. Right. So he's going to learn how to apply the bow and arrow, but he's going to be the best. Right. So he goes from one land to the other trying to find the right teacher, and he can't, and he keeps looking. And then finally, he gets to a forest where every single tree, and the trees are growing really close to each other, and yet every single tree has a target drawn on it. Dead center, there is an And he's like, this is amazing. This is the guy I want for my teacher, because I mean, some of those arrows were impossible to shoot.
Right.
So he goes looking, and the people of the village direct him to the guy that they call the village idiot. They say, you want to go and talk to him? He's the stupid man. He has no brains. We call him the fool, but yeah, you can talk to him. So he goes to him and he says, how did you shoot these arrows? How did you get them dead center? He says, it's simple. I shoot the arrow, then I paint the target around it. And for me, that's actually the magic of a story. You tell the story, you let it drop.
Yeah.
You see the ripples going out. Everybody will take from the story whatever makes sense to them.
Yeah.
And once they pick that up, you then go in with what your message has to be.
Yeah.
So everybody learns from it just what they want to learn. So I think stories are absolute magic, yes. I think that the Indian stories are absolutely fantastic. I think that unfortunately a lot of people don't like the word mythology because they don't, like we were saying, you listen to a story, you take from it what makes sense to you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't understand the meaning of the word mythology, so it becomes objectionable. So let's just call it Indian folk tales or Indian tales or ancient Indian stories.
Right.
Yeah, it's just easier.
Yeah.
It causes less problem.
I came across this. I came across this conflict because I once did a session on how a neuroscientist would interpret certain stories from the Ramayana. So in Ramayana, there is one story of Ahilya, who was tricked by Lord Indra, and he came to her as dressed up as a husband, and then her husband cursed her to be a stone, and then she remained a stone until years later Lord Ram came to her and brought her back. And it occurred to me that, hey, this could be a very nice interpretation of depression, where if your husband accuses you of something that you haven't done, and you go into that a very dark place, and you don't talk to anybody, you don't want to meet anybody, and then you find the right person who can talk to you in a way that helps you and changes your narrative. Now, when I described this story,
I had an amazing idea. I love it.
I'm so glad. I really wanted to hear what you think about it.
It's so apt. It's so good. I'll tell you in a minute what more there is about this. But yeah, go on. I like what you're saying.
So in that description, I had written that these are interpretations of mythological stories. And I got a lot of flack for that. Because the majority of the comments were, oh, you think these are mythological stories? You clearly don't know our history. And that's the first time I realized this conflict.
Unfortunately, like I said, also words mean different things to us. So I realized this when I first started doing my work on the arts of seduction, which is also the title of the first book. It's the title of my first TED Talk. The word seduction means so many different things to so many different people because it's taken on the burden of societal disapproval over the centuries. So seduction is become a bad word.
Yep.
You can never quite get it right. So I don't argue the point anymore about whether there's stories, whether it's history, what it is, because it's no point. It derails the argument.
Right.
It derails the point you're trying to make. So I think some things, you pick your battles. So you say, okay, let's call them our ancient stories.
Right.
And I'm happy with being able to do that. I think that the story of Ahalya is an incredible one. I discovered much later because there are other stories that are similar to this from the Skanda Puran, for instance. And the idea was that when you turned somebody into a stone, what happened was that you excommunicated them, you threw them out of society, you took away their voice.
Right.
You made them voiceless.
Right.
Till somebody comes back and gives you the power of that voice again and says, you are accepted back in society.